welcome to Dream It, Dare It, Do It, Live the Life You Want. I'm Jasmine. I'm your host for this podcast. And today I have another episode with friend and colleague, and I'm so happy to introduce you. You've seen him before, but we're going to do it again. Hey, Gary. Hi, Gary.
Hi, Jasmine.
How you doing?
Doing pretty well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm
Good.
good. So, everyone who's listening, the reason why I have Gary on today is because Gary has created a new book. He just wrote a new book and it came out. And so we want to talk about it. And it's called The Slightly Older Person's Guide to Graceful Aging, which I thought gave me a chuckle when he told me about this title. And it's all about, graceful aging. And I thought that a lot of people who are listening would love to hear his take on it. And so let's talk about your book, Gary. Now, first of all, how did it all come about? Like
As a
what?
complete surprise,
Yeah.
as a complete, utter surprise, because one day, about a year, more than a year ago now, that title popped into my head, and and I wrote it down because when something comes to me like that, I tend to write it down because I know I'll forget it otherwise. And I thought, well, that's pretty good. There's something there. So I wrote it down, and without intending to do anything about it, it felt like it started writing itself. And so I'd sit down, an idea would come to me, and again, I'm carrying around scraps of paper with little notes that I've written, just one line that kind of leads me where I want to go in that particular reflection for that page. And I started writing them down, and then all of a sudden there were a lot of them. And so it was a surprise. I think it came from a need, though, because there's very, very little out there to help people deal with the psychological aspects of aging. There's plenty of stuff about diet and exercise and staying engaged with the world and all that a lot of stuff about that. Very, very, very little about what we believe about old aging and how much of it is actually untrue and how weighed down we can be by those untrue thoughts. And I'm sure anybody who's a certain age knows the kind of thinking I'm talking about. It's the I'm X number of years old, and that means fill in the blank. That means I can't do this anymore. That means I have to do this. That means all that kind of business. It's a weight that people don't realize they're carrying. And so I thought it would be great to have some resource where people could start to examine some of these completely unexamined thoughts. Unexamined assumptions is really what they are, and see if they really had any validity in their own lives. Because letting go of those thoughts is like letting go of a tremendous weight. It's like being in an airport with 15 pieces of luggage and trying to get them all to the gate before you leave,
Mm.
rather than, checking some of the luggage or getting help with it or deciding you really just don't need it. You're going to ship it home instead, you know. So that was where it came from. And it was a complete surprise to me, but I followed the nudge and I kept following every time I had a nudge. Every time I call each page a separate reflection because each page is a standalone thought about a particular subject. And they're arranged in chapters. But each time one of those came to me, I would jot it down and add it to the book. And pretty soon there were 400 reflections. And I didn't really intend it for there to be quite that many, but when the flow is coming, you don't try to shut off the spigot. So I just let it come. So that's where it came from. And a year ago or so, I reached out to a bunch of the first generation 3P teachers and said, would you be willing to look at a little sample? I'd like to know if this resonates with you and you think this is something that would be of value to people. And a number of them were really kind and gave me their time and their attention, and it was a great help. And from there, it just sort of took on a life of its own. And it was published a couple of months ago, and it seems to be doing quite well. Um, all the reviews I've gotten are 5 stars, and people tend to have something really strong and positive to say about the book in the reviews, which is exactly what I wanted. I mean, the point of writing the book was to give people some relief, and I think that's what it's doing.
Yeah, and we kind of like say, a certain age. That's kind of like what you said earlier, but
Hmm.
it starts really early. Like I know for a fact that I started very early saying things like, "Oh,
Yeah.
I can't do that. This is not my age. I can't wear that. I'm too old for that." Like, and it started early. Like, I mean, just listen to some 20-year-olds and they're going to go, "Oh no, no, that I'm too old for that now." It's like
Yeah.
it's like this mental thing, but I think that as we get older, we start really believing it,
Yeah.
you know? Like it's so funny because just today, was it yesterday or today? I like I really don't feel my age. I just don't, like in my head, there's no, like, I remember thinking, oh, 55 is old. And I remember thinking 70 is old, like, and I don't think that anymore. That thought doesn't show up. But I remember, like, I had a flash of the top of my hand and I was like, oh my God, I'm starting to have wrinkles. Like, what the hell is that? My mom had
Yeah.
that kind of, like, it just,
Yeah.
but I'm not doing anything with it. It just kind of like I had a visual of going, oh, look at that. Look at my hands.
Yeah. Yeah. I've
You
got that
know?
all the time too, because I'm a little older than you, like
Yeah.
almost 20 years. And I'll see myself in the mirror if I'm shaving or something and say, "Oh, well, that's a new one there. Never seen that before." But like you just said, I don't really have much in the way of thinking about it. There's no, oh, and that means I'm getting really old. It's just, okay, well, I'm 73 years old. Yeah, there are going to be wrinkles. Yeah, the skin's going to be a little looser than it used to be. That's fine. It's still holding me together. I remember when my mother was very, very old and she was complaining about sort of chicken skin. And uh, I was trying to be supportive, but of course, I was probably too young to really understand what she was going through. But I made a point that I found myself making with myself the other day. She was complaining about her skin, and I said, "Yeah, Mom, but it still does its job." And she says, "What's that?" I said, "To keep the rain out." And that's essentially it. It's still doing its job, so that's good enough for me at this point. I don't expect it to be the way it was when I was 35 or 50 even. It's just not. And it's silly to have that kind of expectation. Just sets you up for disappointment.
So, so what would you tell these people who are like, yeah, well, may not be the age, but my body is not doing what it's supposed to be doing anymore, and that's because I'm old, and like there's a weight around that, right? Like at
Yeah.
certain point, our bodies can't do what they were able to do when they were in their 20s,
No,
unless you've been in the gym every single day. I mean,
no. Well, even if you've been in the gym every single day, it's your body can't do at a certain age what it did when it was half that age or a quarter that age. It just can't. And to have that expectation is just it's an invitation to disappointment, essentially. To have the expectation that you'll always be able to do the same thing. I think every now and then it's really healthy to look at it and say, okay, well, this is what I can expect of myself reasonably anymore. And not to try to say, oh, I just can't do that, but to say, this is reasonable. I can't run 10 miles anymore. I just can't do it. And that's okay. I can go a less distance than that, but I can't do that anymore. I mean, it's a sober reassessment that has to be done from time to time that says, this is where I am in life. This is what my physical abilities allow me to do. And so I'll adjust to that. As I said, it's not a way to shut down and say, that's it, I'm on the couch forever now. That's not a remedy. But there does have to be some kind of adjustment. I, you know, I've said this a lot, and I consider myself lucky because when I was young, I grew up in a place where well, I grew up in California, and there were a lot of older, really healthy people, and people who took their health seriously and understood that in order to feel the way they wanted to feel, they had to eat a certain way and have a certain level of activity and be doing things. And it made sense to me. And so I started that when I was very young. And I was fascinated with the people, the older people who uh, had this sense of aliveness. And I was lucky to be around a number of them. This sense of aliveness that was like a child. And I remember thinking at the time, that's how I want to be. That's the only way to be when you're old. I want to feel as alive. And when you said you didn't use the term 17, but you said something like, on some level, I still feel like I'm young.
Yeah,
So do I. And I remember I put a reflection in the book about this, but I remember taking a big hike in the very steep hills behind the University of California, Berkeley campus when I was in school. And I got to the top of these hills, and these are really kind of hills that are like this. They're straight up. And I met this old guy who's about my age now. And he was an old Australian, and he was coming down the hill. He'd already been up there and coming to the top. And he was a really friendly, nice guy. And we got to talking. And he told me, I feel younger today than I ever have. And I thought there was something about that that grabbed my attention because I was probably 20 at the time, you know? And
yeah,
it just grabbed my attention because it wasn't what I was used to seeing from somebody who was clearly in their 70s. I mean, he looked old, but there was no sense of diminishment or he was all there. That aliveness was untouched. And I thought, that's what I want. That's what I want. The way to get back to that aliveness is to start looking at all the untrue beliefs we have about what age means. As soon as those are gone, that aliveness is uncovered and it's just as alive as it ever was. So, in a way, I guess I'm starting to understand. I wrote this book partly for me too, but it
yeah,
was really to give people an idea, and with any luck, before they're too old, that this is something that it's too good to take a look at now. I mean, that book is great for older people. I really wrote it for people who are younger and who are willing to admit that they're getting older. And most of us aren't that way. I mean, I have an awful lot of friends, and if somebody suggests that they, at the age I am now, 73, are old, boy, they get pretty upset. I'm not old. I'm not old. Well, in some ways, yes, you are, because,
mm,
you're practically at the maximum life expectancy. You know, Anything else is gravy at this point. I was telling you before the podcast, I got a text from a friend the other day who said, I got a heart transplant today. He was texting me the same day he'd gotten a heart transplant. Now, this guy has a brand new lease on life because he's been wearing a defibrillator and a pacemaker for more than 20 years, both installed in his chest. The years are being peeled off him right now because he has this sensation of aliveness that he probably hasn't had in a long time. That's what I want to give people back because they already have it, but it's covered up. Let's uncover it for God's sake. It's no
yeah.
way to live.
I totally believe it. I mean, I've seen it for myself in my life, not just about age, but just like that when things become heavy, it's because there's some thinking in place that I believe and that creates or extinguishes hope.
Yeah.
When hope disappears, you're kind of like, oh, it's so hard. And I totally get as well how you wrote it for yourself because I don't think that you could have you could have written it if you hadn't felt it first.
Oh no, no, no. No, these are all from feeling and experience. It's not an intellectual exercise. And that's the
Yeah.
whole point of the book. It's not an intellectual exercise. It's a way of looking at something in a really fresh, completely clean way. unpolluted by that sort of thinking that you're talking about, that weighty thinking. An analogy just came to mind. That feeling of heaviness, it's like pouring maple syrup in the crankcase of an engine and expecting it's going to lubricate like oil. It can't. The pistons can barely move if they have something that thick in there. This is like giving the engine a good clean and uh, you know re-lubricating it, changing the oil, changing the filter, getting something in there that allows it to function the way it was intended to function.
Yeah, and you built it in such a way that it's not one of those books that you have to read chapter one and then chapter two and then chapter three. That's not how you built it, right? You can just open anything and it's kind of like, what does the universe want to tell you today?
Yeah.
Just open the page and see what you're going to read, right?
Oh, and it's really funny for me to hear people who are doing that. They say, I opened your book the other day and it was like to the perfect page. It was just what I needed. And I thought, "Huh, that's perfect. That's what I wanted." It's funny because um, I the first page of the book says, "Here's how to get the best out of this book." And it essentially says what you've just said. Don't try to read it straight through. This is like drinking from a fire hose if you try to do that. This is best taken in small doses where you can kind of reflect on it, and just be quiet and see where it goes in you. And if people want to motor their way through the book, that's a waste of time. You're not going to get from it what you might get otherwise, you know.
Yeah.
So it's good in short doses. I call it it's a good bathroom book, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pick it up for 5 or 10 minutes at a time and see where it takes you. And if it doesn't take you anywhere, put it down. And if it does, sit with that for a little while and see where it gets you. See if you have any new insights about what that particular reflection was about.
Yeah. I'm looking at the reviews and I'm seeing the first one, the relevancy of every page. First, I love the title. It's a catchy and memorable. Most of the pages have great wisdom and really hit me where I needed to be hit. I bought one for a friend and she also loves it and told me it has really helped with some things she has been struggling with. Gary has truly filled the pages with thoughtful wisdom.
Yeah, I love hearing that kind of stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
I
Keep this
just
book handy as a reference to refer to it often. What a
yeah.
gem. The right book for our times. Gary Stine has written a charming and insightful guide to growing older. And if you're not careful, you'll do it with grace.
It's the
So
important.
it's like, it's really, you get a lot of people that loved it, that, because it's not preaching, it's just hey, think about this,
Mhm.
look at it
Mhm.
this way,
Yeah, right.
kind of
Look at
thing.
this direction for a minute. See what this feels like. Try this on for size. Yeah, yeah, that's the whole point. I want it to be gentle. It doesn't need to be an admonition or I'm not there to scold anybody or to teach anybody. I'm just there to help people maybe see something they hadn't seen before that might be helpful.
So what's going to be the next step with this? Are you going to be like doing some coaching for people? Like if anybody is like loves the book and think, oh
Oh
man,
yeah,
I wish
yeah.
I could explore this with the guided guy.
Well, there are a couple of things that I've been thinking about just because one of them has been a request. One is a specific program for people who are going through a big transition of some sort, and very often that's retirement.
Mm,
Um, or it might be a divorce, or it might be some big life change where they feel like a new perspective would help them enormously. Um, so that's one of the things that it's written for. I'm sorry, I was answering a question. Now I've forgotten what the question was that I was answering.
what's next?
Oh,
What's
yeah.
next?
So there'll be probably some program with both a group component and a private component about coaching around big life change. And there'll also be um, another program that it hasn't quite crystallized in my mind yet what it's going to be, but it's going to be something around the uh, looking at these issues together.
Mm,
looking at these issues in a way that might help you divorce yourself from a lot of the untrue thinking about old age, because it takes a little bit of diligence to look at this stuff and realize that it's, I mean, to look at these assumptions that we have about aging, and to realize that they're made of thought, and it's not very high quality thought to begin with. It just
yeah.
doesn't hold together.
Yeah.
So it'll be something like that. I'm not sure what.
Well, you're already, I mean, anybody that is interested in having some guidance right now, they can just reach out to you. They can go onto your website and fill in a contact form and reach out to you,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
The programs aren't developed yet, but you're doing coaching already, right? You
Yeah,
just don't
they,
have
they
that.
will be. They will be soon.
Yeah.
Like I'm not pushing it because, as I said, I'm still waiting for them. There'll be a day, and I'm sure it'll be probably soon, when it will just be clear. Oh, this is what to do with that. This is the way that looks. This is how to proceed with that.
Yeah, I love that I mean that we work this way, like you and I, we do this, we understand. We're just kind of like, oh well, if it's not coming, it's just not ready.
Oh yeah,
It'll come.
right, right.
You know, and there's no pressure around it, and it's just kind of like,
That's gotten to be easy for both of us based on the experiences we've had and the training we've had. But for it's astonishing how hard people are on themselves, and it doesn't ease up over time. It doesn't ease up with age. It doubles down, as a matter of fact. People tend to be even harder on themselves when they something isn't going to the schedule they think it's going. It should be going. I don't have that kind of schedule anymore. I've learned to see through it, and I don't miss it. It's nice to be able to think, okay, not quite done yet. Fine. Put it back in the oven. Let it sit there for a little while longer. It will let me know. It always does. It's not, it can sound like a form of procrastination. Well, I guess it's not ready yet. Oh, that's good. I don't have to work on it now. That's not it at all. It's just understanding, if I try to give birth now, it's premature. It's not ready. It'll tell me when it's ready, because I'll have an insight of some sort that says, ah, here's the answer to that. There's the way to do it. And, you know, because I've learned over the years that that's absolutely 100% dependable, I don't question it. I just wait for it. There's always something else I can be doing. I don't have to do this particular project at this particular moment.
mm. You've been doing a lot of blogging as well, right? Maybe not in the last month, but you've been doing a lot of blogging, right? Like that, these articles are just like plopping into your head, and you're like, oh, I'm gonna do this.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the same. I don't decide to write anything anymore. It decides to be written and decides to use me as the filter. And so I take up the pen, or the fingertips, as it were.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no, this is kind of attached to what we were just talking about, something not being ready. You know this, but I had a knee replacement a month ago, 4 weeks ago today, I think. And in that time, I was doing very, very, very little. Couldn't concentrate easily, couldn't focus easily. I did no writing at all for a month. Now, I don't know the last time I did that. It's been years. And um, and I noticed that I wasn't worried about it. It wasn't like, oh Christ, it's gone, I've gone dry. That's it. Nothing will ever come again. I've gone dry. There was no thought like that. It was okay. There's nothing right now, because that's not what I'm supposed to be doing right now. What I'm supposed to be doing is resting and healing, and that's what I'll do. But of course, there were a couple of times after 3 weeks or so when I thought, well, I, I wonder when the impulse to create is going to come back.
Yeah.
And as soon as I felt a little better, as soon as I had a little bit of energy, as soon as I could sleep at night, all of a sudden there it was, just ready to go again, completely full, ready to spill over the top, waiting for me to pour it. So that's why I sent you a blog yesterday and a blog today. It's
Yeah.
just, now it wants to come out again. So I'm letting it come out.
Yeah. it's funny because I was just listening to a show, and this person said, I do like the wolves. He said, the wolves, when they don't feel well, they stop eating. So when I don't feel well, I stop eating, and I only start eating again once I start feeling better, you know? And that's kind of like what I heard in what you just said. Sometimes, even if our mind says, oh, I should be working, I should be writing, I should be doing this, I should be doing that, it's actually doesn't matter because what you're supposed to be doing right now is healing and resting,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? Like, how many people have we spoken to? They're like, okay, I pushed, and now I have to go to the hospital,
Yes.
you know?
Yeah. And not to mention the fact that that's gonna slow down the healing process. It's also going to make them feel like crap
Yeah.
because they're beating themselves up for something they think they should be able to do and they can't because their body isn't capable of it at that moment. You know, much easier to be able to say, okay, I'm going to be easy on myself. I mean, the blog I wrote yesterday was about. It was called "What Does Pain Have to Teach Me This Time?" Because
Mm.
I've written quite a lot about being in physical pain most of the time. This was a new source of pain on top of the sources that already exist, the ongoing sources of physical pain. And it took me a while to adjust to it because, I could barely get a deep breath. It just hurt so much. Um, but at the same time, I knew I didn't freak out about that because I knew that it was just a transitory state. I knew that it was not permanent. I knew that I wasn't going to be like that forever. And I knew that the best thing I could do is just to be easy on myself and give myself a break instead of doubling down and being even harder and saying, okay, well, you sit down now and you write for an hour and a half, whether you have anything to say or not, and whether you feel like you can. No, it took me most of my life to learn that, but I finally learned it.
Yeah, it's just crazy how we can be so difficult on ourselves, like so hard on ourselves and so like demanding and
Yeah,
like, and we wouldn't even do that to our loved ones. Like, why are we doing it to ourselves?
no,
It's kind of like there's somewhere that we forget to put our mask on first, right? There's like this whole thing, this whole image of, put your mask on first. Like, we should be nice to ourselves first. I remember seeing where I was loyal. There was this like I'm a loyal person, so I have to be loyal, right? And I started seeing that I was loyal to somebody else, but I wasn't loyal to myself. Like,
mm,
me being loyal to them was being disloyal to me. And there was this, like, I had a true struggle for a while. And I was like, no, actually, I'm not here to be miserable. We weren't put on this earth to be miserable,
yeah,
right? So it was kind of like, okay, well, wait a sec, then let me see, what is it that I truly want? What is it that will make sense to me in this situation, for
yeah,
example? Like,
yeah.
we just hurt ourselves without
Yeah, well,
knowing. It's innocent though, right?
oh, it's innocent, but there's kind of a failure to recognize ourselves as people with actual needs when we do that, when we're more loyal to somebody else than we are to ourselves. Oh, I'll just forget about myself. Well, that's certainly not the way to share the love that you're made of in the most effective way.
Mhm.
Because if you're not taking care of yourself, you're not going to be able to really love anybody else. It's just you can't do it. You're withholding love from yourself is withholding love from the world. Very
Mhm.
simply, because you are the world. Each of us is all of us. You know, each of us is just a piece of the greater one, the greater thing, the greater whole. So yeah, it's really it. What a strange thought to think, to believe. Yes, my loyalty to others That's what's important. My loyalty to myself, to taking care of myself and regarding myself as having needs that should be met. And I'm not talking about desires, I'm talking about needs that should be
Mhm.
met. And one of those needs is certainly taking care of yourself and being kind to yourself. I
Yeah.
mean, how can people possibly get the best out of themselves, expect to get the best out of themselves when they're beating themselves up constantly? And I see
Yeah.
that with clients all the time, and it's become such a habit. They don't know they're doing it, and it takes a while to unearth that and help them see. Can you see what you're doing right now to yourself? What does that feel like? Do you like the way it feels? Do you think that's encouraging you to give your best to the world? It can be very, very, very difficult for people to see, but when you see it, boy, it sure makes a difference.
Yeah. Well, Gary, we've gone through the whole 30 minutes.
Have we?
We
Wow,
have.
that was
So
fast.
so I want to thank you. Thank you for coming back. I'm hoping that people are going to buy the book, you
Me
know.
too. Me too.
So we're going to, guys, put in the description where you can get the book, but essentially you can go to GaryStine.com and you'll see I put a link on the website. Yes, I put a link on the website. Uh, so if you guys want to get your copy, do that. You can reach out to Gary that way as well. Is there
Can I
anything
just say
else?
one thing?
Yes.
Let's put the right spelling in there because people invariably spell it
Oh,
the wrong way. My last name is spelled Stine, so it's GaryStine. Gary at GaryStine.com.
there you go. Well, thank you again. I hope that you
Thank you for having me
heal
again. That was fun.
everything. I hope everything's going to heal in the knee area.
It will.
And so everybody else, I'm going to say, hey, dream it, dare it, do it, live the life you want, and I'll see you in the next episode. You have a good one. Bye.
Thanks.